Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to make this video before too much misinformation got out, but believe it or not, the F16V will not be a better F16 than the CM PoBIT. And you might be wondering, like, why bigger number, later letter, that should mean that it's better or something like that. But usually the case would be. However, the Block 52 CM PoBIT was the PoBIT upgrade brought it up to block 70 and 72 standards. For the 52 specifically, it brought it up to 72 standards. The current block 72 in the Chinese tech tree, in the dev server, is a block 20 upgraded to 72 standards. However, it's missing one key thing, and that's the engine. See, you might be wondering, okay, so the Block 72 should have a Pratt & Whitney F100-229, and you would be right. However, for the Taiwanese F-16Vs, specifically the Block 72s, they were incapable of putting in the 229 because it's an F-16A airframe, meaning it could only get the 220. Yeah, Taiwan does have Block 70s. I believe they ordered like 30 of them or something. However, they have more 72s. So this plane, it's an F-16A airframe, right? But I should be more specific. It's actually an F-16A ADF airframe with the same engine. So wait, hold on. It actually has the same flight performance as the ADF, right? Wrong. It's actually worse. It has a worse thrust to weight, not by a whole lot, but enough because it gets more avionics than the standard ADF. The Block 72, the Block 15 ADF, and the Block 20 for China, the Block 15 AM for Belgium, and all the other AMs and ADF Block 15s have the same thrust to weight, and that is 1.0. It has barely a positive thrust to weight. And because the F-16V is a slightly heavier one, you guessed it, it has a negative thrust to weight. Let's look at the data here. I have StatChark up here. StatChark can be a pretty good source for most things because it gets to the bare bones. However, there can be some inaccuracies. That's why you can't really use it for a valid bug report or anything like that. So I have the data up here for the Block 72 and the Block 15 ADF. And you might notice there is some differences in turn performance right off the bat. You can see that the lines are separated. So, believe it or not, the ADF is the worst turning F-16 in the game. Not instantaneous turn rate. Instantaneous turn rate of that plane is pretty phenomenal. It's one of the best. But the sustained turn rate is worse than every other F-16 in game, basically. So, the Block 15 gets 21 degrees a second, right around 8 Gs, 420 knots. The 72 gets slightly worse, which is 21.07. It's a slight difference, right? But it is technically worse. And remember how I said the ADF was the worst turning F-16 in game? This is the Block 52s, the green. Look at how much better that is. And it has everything to do with the engine. The airframe is pretty much identical to the ADF and the 72s. However, it has a different engine. The engine means everything in this sustained turn rate because it can hold more Gs for longer. It pulls almost a whole degree a second more than the Block 72. However, because the airframe's technically lighter, it can pull more instantaneous. And you might think, well, that's much better for notching. And you're right here. Like, it can notch better than the 52. Not by much. It's about a few degrees, right? But the main kicker here is the thrust to weight. So I got the info charts here. We can see all the mass and stuff. We can see how the 52's heavier than both, but only by 1,000 kilograms, right? But here's where it's most important. This is the thrust to weight of all three fighters. This is the ADFs right here. Remember how I told you it was about 1.0? It's about 1.0 here. That's a negative thrust to weight from the 72. And because it has a negative thrust to weight, its acceleration is worse than the PoBIT's. The PoBIT has much higher thrust to weight, so it can accelerate more. Granted, in certain scenarios, the 220 at a really high speed can produce more thrust, which is pretty cool. But in modern day combat, you don't really need high speed. What you need is high acceleration. And if you don't have high acceleration, you cannot recover from any defensive maneuvers. Let's look at the engine charts here. So we got the engine up, and you can see that the 72s and the ADFs are pretty much the same. They're like legit the same because they're the same engine. But look at how much more thrust the PoBIT produces. That's a huge margin. That's like almost 4,000 kilograms of thrust. Or 1,000 pounds of thrust. That's insane. That is a huge difference. And if you bleed all your speed in an ADF, or you bleed all your speed in the 72, it's going to be hard to recover any airspeed. The only way you could beat a PoBIT in a fight is instantaneous and low speeds. Low speeds you will beat a PoBIT, but the PoBIT will outrate you, 100%. And the acceleration, look at the acceleration difference. Huge margin. If the 72 had the light airframe of the ADF and the power of the 229, it would be the best F16 in the game. But hold on a second. There already is one with that, and that's the PoBIT. The PoBIT will remain the best F16 in the game until the Block 70 or the Block 50 PoBIT get added. Because the Block 50 and the Block 70 have the GE F110 129, which is a more powerful engine and can produce more thrust and is way better accelerating. Until one of those two planes gets added, the PoBIT, the 52 PoBIT, will remain the best F16 in the game. Without a doubt. And I say this because there is no avionics difference between both planes, because the PoBIT received the radar and other avionics that the 72 and 70s would have. The Block 50 produces way more thrust than the Block 52. It has a much higher thrust to weight. It's slightly heavier, so it doesn't turn as well, but in some circumstances, it can maintain a sustained turn rate a lot better. But like I said before, the Block 52 PoBIT, until the Block 70 or the Block 50 PoBIT get added, will remain the best F16 in the game. So, to all the American users out there who like the F16 and think they are getting screwed over by Gaijin, you are not. In fact, China is getting the most screwed over here, because they could have received the Block 70. So, don't be mad. Actually, be happy. But anyways, guys, if you're new around here, please subscribe, like the video if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.